Kim by Rudyard Kipling. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Kim by Rudyard Kipling. Read by Adrian Pretzelis. Chapter 13, Part 1. Who hath desired the sea, the immense, contemptuous surges? The shudder, the stumble, the swerve ere the star-stabbing bowsprit emerges, the orderly clouds of the trades, and the ridged roaring sapphire thereunder, unheralded cliff-lurking floors, and the headsails' low-volleying thunder. His sea in no wonder the same, his sea and the same in each wonder, his sea that his being fulfils? So and no otherwise, so and no otherwise, hill-men desire their hills. The sea and the hills. Who goes to the hills goes to his mother. They had crossed the Siwaliks and the half-tropical Doon, left Mussoorie behind them, and headed north along the narrow hill roads. Day after day they struck deeper into the huddled mountains, and day after day Kim watched the lama return to a man's strength. Among the terraces of the Doon he had leaned on the boy's shoulder, ready to profit by wayside halts. Under the great ramp to Mussoorie he drew himself altogether as an old hunter faces a well-remembered bank, and where he should have sunk exhausted, swung his long draperies about him, drew a deep double lungful of the diamond air, and walked as only a hillman can. Kim, plains-bred and plains-fed, sweated and panted, astonished. "This is my country," said the lama. "Besides, Such Zen, this is flatter than a rice-field." And with steady, driving strokes from the loins he strode upwards. But it was on the steep downhill marches, 3,000 feet in 3 hours, that he went utterly away from Kim, whose back arched with holding back, and whose big toe was nigh cut off by his grass sandal-string. Through the speckled shadow of the great deodar forests, through oak feathered and plumed with ferns, birch, ilex, rhododendron, and pine, out on the bare hillside's slippery, sunburnt grass, and back into the woodland's coolth again, till oak gave way to bamboo and palm of the valley, the lama swung untiring. Glancing back in the twilight at the huge ridges behind him and the faint, thin line of the road whereby they had come, he would lay out, with a hillman's generous breadth of vision, fresh marches for the morrow, or, halting in the neck of some uplifted pass that gave on Spiti and Kulu, would stretch out his hands yearningly towards the high snows of the horizon. In the dawns they flared windy red above stark blue, as Kedarnath and Badrinath, kings of that wilderness, took the first sunlight. All day long they lay like molten silver under the sun, and at evening put on their jewels again. At first they breathed temperately upon the travellers, winds good to meet when one crawled over some gigantic hog's back. But in a few days, at a height of 9,000 or 10,000 feet, those breezes bit, and Kim kindly allowed a village of hillmen to acquire merit by giving him a rough blanket coat. The lama was mildly surprised that anyone should object to the knife-edged breezes which had cut the years off his shoulders. "These are but the lower hills, chela. There is no cold till we come to the true hills." "Air and water are good, and the people are devout enough, but the food is very bad," Kim growled. "And we walk as though we were mad or English. It freezes at night too." "A little may be, but only enough to make old bones rejoice in the sun. We must not always delight in soft beds and rich food." "We might at least Keep to the road." Kim had all a plainsman's affection for the well-trodden track, not 6 feet wide, that snaked among the mountains, but the lama, being Tibetan, could not refrain from short-cuts over spurs and the rims of gravel-strewn slopes. As he explained to his limping disciple, a man bred among mountains can prophesy the course of a mountain road, and though low-lying clouds might be a hindrance to a short-cutting stranger, they made no earthly difference to a thoughtful man. Thus, after long hours of what would be reckoned very fair mountaineering in civilized countries, they would pant over a saddleback, sidle past a few landslips, and drop through forest at an angle of 45 onto the road again. Along their track lay the villages of the hill folk, mud and earth huts, timbers now and then rudely carved with an axe, clinging like swallows' nests against the steeps, huddled on tiny flats halfway down a 3,000-foot glissade, jammed into a corner between cliffs that funnelled and focused every wandering blast, or, for the sake of summer pasture, cowering down on a neck that in winter would be 10 feet deep in snow. And the people, the sallow, greasy, duffel-clad people, with short, bare legs and faces almost Esquimaux, would flock out and adore. The plains, kindly and gentle, had treated the lama as a holy man among holy men, but the hills worshipped him as one in the confidence of all their devils. Theirs was an almost obliterated Buddhism, overlaid with a nature worship fantastic as their own landscapes, elaborate as the terracing of their tiny fields. But they recognized the big hat, the clicking rosary, and the rare Chinese texts for great authority, and they respected the man beneath the hat. "We see thee come down over the black breasts of Yuah," said a Betar who gave them cheese, sour milk, and stone-hard bread one evening. "We do not use that often, except when carving cows stray in summer. There is a summer wind amongst those stones that casts men down on the stillest day. But what should such folk care for the devil of Yuah?" Then did Kim, aching in every fibre, dizzy with looking down, footsore with cramping, desperate toes in inadequate crannies, take joy in the day's march. Such joy as a boy of St. Xavier's, who had won the quarter-mile on the flat, might take in the praises of his friends. The hills sweated the ghee and sugar-suet off his bones. The dry air, taken sobbingly at the head of cruel passes, firmed and built out his upper ribs, and the tilted levels put new hard muscles into calf and thigh. They meditated often on the wheel of life, the more so since, as the lama said, they were freed from its visible temptations. Except the grey eagle and an occasional far-seen bear grubbing and rooting on the hillside, a vision of a furious painted leopard met at dawn in a still valley devouring a goat, and now and again a bright-coloured bird, they were alone with the winds and the grass singing under the wind. The women of the smoky huts over whose roofs the two walked as they descended the mountains were unlovely and unclean, wives of many husbands and afflicted with goiter. The men were woodcutters when they were not farmers, meek and of an incredible simplicity. But that suitable discourse might not fail, fate sent them, overtaking and overtaken on the road, the courteous Dakar physician, who paid for his food in ointments good for goiter and counsels that restore peace between men and women. He seemed to know these hills as well as he knew the hill dialects, and gave the lama the lie of the land towards Ladakh and Tibet. He said they could return to the plains at any moment. Meanwhile, for such as loved mountains, yonder road might amuse. This was not at all revealed in a breath, but at evening encounters on the stone threshing floors, when, patients disposed of, the doctor would smoke and the lama snuff, while Kim watched the wee cows grazing on the housetops, or threw his soul after his eye across the deep blue gulfs between range and range. And there were talks apart in the dark woods, when the doctor would seek herbs, and Kim, as a budding physician, must accompany him. "You see, Mr. O'Hara, I do not know what the deuce and all I shall do when I find our sporting friends, but if you will kindly keep within sight of my umbrella, which is a fine fixed point for cadastral survey, I shall feel much better." Kim looked out across the jungle of peaks. "This is not my country, Hakim. Easier, I think, to find one louse in a bearskin." "Oh, that is my strong points. There is no hurry for hurry. They were at Leh not so long ago. They said they had come down from the Karakorum with their heads and horns and all. I am only afraid they will have sent back all their letters and compromising things from Leh into Russian territory. Of course, they will walk away as far to the east as possible, just to show that they were never among the western states. You do not know the hills?" He scratched with a twig on the earth. "Look. They should have come in by Srinagar or Abbottabad. That is their short road. Down the river by Banji and Astor. But they have made mischief in the west, so—" He drew a furrow from left to right. "They march and they march away east to Leh. Ah, it is cold there, and down the Indus to Hanleh. I know that road. And then down, you see, to Bushahar and Chini Valley. That is ascertained by process of elimination, and also by asking questions from people that I cure so well. Our friends have been a long time playing about and producing impressions, so they are well known from far off. You will see me catch them somewhere in Chini Valley. Please keep your eye on the umbrella." It nodded like a wind-blown harebell down the valleys and round the mountain sides, and in due time the lama and Kim, who steered by compass, would overhaul it, vending ointments and powders at eventide. "We came by such and such a way." The lama would throw a careless finger backward at the ridges, and the umbrella would expand itself in compliments. They crossed the snowy pass in cold moonlight, when the lama, mildly chaffing Kim, went through up to his knees like a Bactrian camel, the snow-bred, shag-haired sort that come into the Kashmir Serai. They dipped across beds of light snow and snow-powdered shale, where they took refuge from a gale in a camp of Tibetans hurrying down tiny sheep, each laden with a bag of borax. They came out upon grassy shoulders, still snow-speckled, and through forest to grass anew. For all their marchings, Kedarnath and Badrinath were not impressed, and it was only after days of travel that Kim, uplifted upon some insignificant 10,000-foot hummock, could see that a shoulder knot or horn of the two great lords had, ever so slightly, changed outline. At last they entered a world within a world, a valley of leagues where the high hills were fashioned of the mere rubble and refuse from off the knees of the mountains. Here one day's march carried them no farther, it seemed, than a dreamer's clogged pace bears him in a nightmare. They skirted a shoulder painfully for hours, and behold, it was but an outlying boss in an outlying buttress of the main pile. A rounded meadow revealed itself when they had reached it for a vast tableland running far into the valley. 3 days later it was a dim fold in the earth to the southward. "Surely the gods live here," said Kim, beaten down by the silence and the appalling sweep and dispersal of the cloud shadows after rain. "This is no place for men." "Long and long ago," said the lama as to himself, "it was asked of the Lord whether the world were everlasting. To this the Excellent One returned no answer. When I was in Ceylon, a wise seeker confirmed that from the Gospel, which is written in Pali. Certainly, since we know the way to freedom, the question were unprofitable. But look, and no illusion, Chela. These are the true hills. They are like my hills by Sutsen. Never were such hills. Above them, still enormously above them, earth towered away towards the snow line, where from east to west, across hundreds of miles, ruled as with a ruler, the last of the bold birches stopped. Above that, in scarps and blocks upheaved, the rocks strove to fight their heads above the white smother. Above these again, changeless since the world's beginning, but changing to every mood of sun and cloud, lay out the eternal snow. They could see blots and blurs on its face where storm and wandering woolly-wah got up to dance. Below them, as they stood, the forest slid away in a sheet of blue-green for mile upon mile. Below the forest was a village in its sprinkle of terraced fields and steep grazing grounds. Below the village they knew, through a thunderstorm worried and growled there for the moment, a pitch of 1200 or 1500 feet gave to the moist valley where the streams gather that are the mothers of young Sutlej. As usual, the lama had led Kim by cow track and by road, far from the main route along which Hurry Babu, that fearful man, had bucketed 3 days before through a storm to which 9 Englishmen out of 10 would have given full right of way. Hurry was no game shot. The snick of a trigger made him change colour, but, as he himself would have said, he was fairly efficient stalker, and he had raked the huge valley with a pair of cheap binoculars to some purpose. Moreover, the white of worn canvas tents against green carries far. Hurry Babu had seen all he wanted to see when he sat on the threshing floor of Ziglau, 20 miles away as the eagle flies, and 40 by road, that is to say, 2 small dots, which one day were just below the snow line, and the next had moved downwards, perhaps 6 inches on the hillside. Once cleaned out and set to the work, his fat bare legs could cover a surprising amount of ground, and this was the reason why, while Kim and the lama lay in a leaky hut at Ziglau till the storm should be overpast, an oily, wet, but always smiling Bengali, talking the best of English with the vilest of phrases, was ingratiating himself with 2 sodden and rather rheumatic foreigners. He had arrived, revolving many wild schemes, on the heels of a thunderstorm which had split a pine over against their camp, and so convinced a dozen or 2 forcibly impressed baggage coolies the day was inauspicious for further travel that, with one accord, they had thrown down their loads and jibbed. They were subjects of a hill Rajah who farmed out their services, as is the custom, for his private gain. And, to add to their personal distresses, the strange Sahibs had already threatened them with rifles. The most of them knew rifles and Sahibs of old. They were trackers and shikaris of the northern valleys, keen after bear and wild goat, but they had never been thus treated in their lives. So the forest took them to her bosom, and, for all oaths and clamour, refused to restore. There was no need to feign madness or— The Babu had thought of another means of securing a welcome. He wrung out his wet clothes, slipped on his patent leather shoes, opened the blue and white umbrella, and with mincing gait and a heart beating against his tonsils, appeared as "Agent for His Royal Highness the Rajah of Rampur, gentlemen. What can I do for you, please?" The gentlemen were delighted. One was visibly French, the other Russian, but they spoke English not much inferior to the Babu's. They begged his kind offices. Their native servants had gone sick at Leh. They had hurried on because they were anxious to bring the spoils of the chase to Simla ere the skins grew moth-eaten. They bore a general letter of introduction—the Babu salaamed to it orientally—to all Government officials. No, they had not met any other shooting parties en route. They did for themselves. They had plenty of supplies. They only wished to push on as soon as might be. At this he waylaid a cowering hillman among the trees, and after 3 minutes' talk and a little silver—one cannot be economical upon State service, though Hurry's heart bled at the waste—the 11 coolies and the 3 hangers-on reappeared. At least the Babu would be a witness to their oppression. "My royal master, he will be much annoyed, but these people are only common people and grossly ignorant. If your honours will kindly overlook unfortunate affair, I shall be much pleased. In a little while rain will stop, and we can then proceed. You have been shooting, eh? That is fine performance." He skipped nimbly from one kilter to the next, making pretence to adjust each conical basket. The Englishman is not, as a rule, familiar with the Asiatic, but he would not strike across the wrist a kindly Babu who accidentally upset a kilter with a red oilskin top. On the other hand, he would not press drink upon a Babu were he never so friendly, nor would he invite him to meat. The strangers did all these things and asked many questions, about women mostly, to which Hurry returned gay and unstudied answers. They gave him a glass of whitish fluid like to gin, and then more, and in a little time his gravity departed from him. He became thickly treasonous, and spoke in terms of sweeping indecency of a government which had forced upon him a white man's education and neglected to supply him with a white man's salary. He babbled tales of oppression and wrongs till the tears ran down his cheeks for the miseries of his land. Then he staggered off, singing love songs of Lower Bengal, and collapsed upon a wet tree trunk. Never was so unfortunate a product of English rule in India more unhappily thrust upon aliens. "They are all just of that pattern," said one sportsman to the other in French. "When we get into India proper, thou wilt see. I should like to visit his Rajah. One might speak the good word there. It is possible that he has heard of us and wishes to signify his goodwill." "We have not time. We must get into Simla as soon as may be," his companion replied. "For my own part, I wish our reports had been sent back from Hillas or even Leh. The English post is better and safer. Remember, we are given all facilities, and, name of God, they gave them to us too. Is it unbelievable stupidity?" "It is pride. Pride that deserves and will receive punishment." "Yes, to fight a fellow continental in our game is something. There is risk attached. But these people, bah! It is too easy." "Pride. All pride, my friend." "Now, what the deuce is good of Chandernagore being so close to Calcutta and all?" said Hurry, snoring open-mouthed on the sodden moss. "If I cannot understand their French, they talk so particularly fast. It would have been much better to cut their beastly throats." When he presented himself again, he was racked with a headache, penitent, and volubly afraid that in his drunkenness he might have been indiscreet. He loved the British Government. It was the source of all prosperity and honour, and his master at Rampur held the very same opinion. Upon this the men began to deride him, and to quote past words, till, step by step, with depreciating smirks, oily grins, and leers of infinite cunning, the poor Babu was beaten out of his defences and forced to speak truth. When Lurgan was told the tale later, he mourned aloud that he could not have been in the place of the stubborn, inattentive coolies. who, with grass mats over their heads and the raindrops puddling in their footsteps, waited on the weather. All the Sahibs of their acquaintance, rough-clad men joyously returning year after year to their chosen gullies, had servants and cooks and orderlies, very often hillmen. These Sahibs travelled without any retinue. Therefore they were poor Sahibs and ignorant, for no Sahib in his senses would follow a Bengali's advice. But the Bengali, appearing from somewhere, had given them money, and could make shift with their dialect. Used to comprehensive ill-treatment from their own colour, they suspected a trap somewhere, and stood by to run if occasion offered. Then, through the new-washed air, steaming with delicious earth smells, the Babu led the way down the slopes, walking ahead of the coolies in pride, walking behind the foreigners in humility. His thoughts were many and various. The least of them would have interested his companions beyond words. But he was an agreeable guide, ever keen to point out the beauties of his royal master's domain. He peopled the hills with anything they had a mind to slay—thar, ibex, or makur, and bear by Elisha's allowance. He discoursed of botany and ethnology with unimpeachable inaccuracy, and his store of local legends—he had been a trusted agent of the State for 15 years, remember—was inexhaustible.
"Decidedly this fellow is an original," said the taller of the two foreigners. "He is like the nightmare of a Viennese courier."
"He represents in Little India in transition, the monstrous hybridism of East and West," the Russian replied. "It is we who can deal with Orientals."
"He has lost his own country and has not acquired any other, but he has a most complete hatred of his conquerors. Listen, he confided to me last night," said the other. Under the striped umbrella, Hurree Babu was straining ear and brain to follow the quick-poured French, and keeping both eyes on a kilter full of maps and documents—an over-large one with a double red oilskin cover. He did not wish to steal anything. He only desired to know what to steal, and, incidentally, how to get away when he had stolen it. He thanked all the gods of Hindustan and Herbert Spencer that there remained some valuables to steal. Chapter 13, Part 1.